Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to help you achieve the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, we just finished an amazing series on Adler that I got a lot out of. I hope you did as well. And now I am in the preparatory stages of writing my October newsletter. It will go to the printer on October the 15th. And so these last waning days of September, I'm taking the opportunity to review some of the literature that I have available to me that I haven't fully digested to add to the topic of this month's newsletter. I'm going to be using the methods that we just talked about with syntopical reading. I've identified a collection of books over here, and today's podcast is about one book that I pulled one passage from following Adler's methods, and it traces it all the way through the process from noting the passage, gathering the information out of the passage, to creating the main card, placing the main card, and so on, all the way through. So you can have an opportunity to see from research all the way through, including some snippets of writing, how a Zettelkasten actually fits into daily life. So without further ado, I'll head on over to the down-facing camera so I can show you what I learned, dipping back into How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. If you're a long-time follower of my podcast, you know I've visited this book before, and now I'm visiting it syntopically, looking for specifically the passages that pertain to the subject that I'm writing about this month. See you in the down-facing camera. So here's the key insight that I'm working with: the difference between discomfort and suffering. Amy Feldman Barrett points it out in her book. It shows up on page 187, the first passage that I had identified as being a key passage in the book. Hit gold from the beginning. So discomfort is the physical effects of pain, whereas suffering is the personal experience of pain, physical or emotional. Reading on into page 190, it talks about the differences of pain and the challenges of pain, and this is where my card came from. So here's the main card that I'm tracking today. The information from Amy Feldman Barrett is that if you're going to successfully survive physical pain, especially chronic physical pain, very healthy to be able to separate the physical effects from the pain versus your personal suffering of the pain, so that if you can isolate the pain to being a purely physical effect, it doesn't have to be a personal catastrophe. And she cites her sister-in-law, Deborah Barrett, in her book, Pain Tracking, but also points out scientific evidence that if you can achieve this separation such that pain is exclusively a physical experience, then that has been shown to reduce the need for opiates. And this relates directly to what I'm researching this month or reviewing, is the character trait of patience. And this made me realize that this ability to separate physical discomfort from the experience of pain is at the very heart of patience. In fact, we can go so far as to say that the victory state of patience is separating out the discomfort and dealing with it to whichever extent you may be able to do so. And this relationship turns out to be key. We know that the scale of patience has to do with the degree of suffering, both physical and emotional. But now we know that the lost state of patience is sinking into suffering, whereas the victory state is separating out the discomfort, the physical side, dealing with that the best way you can, and enduring what remains. So now that I have an interesting idea to add to my understanding of patience, my next step is to track that insight that I journaled. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm researching for my next newsletter, my October newsletter, which will need to go to the printer by October 15th. So I've got some time. And I'm studying the character trait of patience, which is the third kind of courage. There are actually three kinds of courage. The first kind is what we think of as tackling a big, scary obstacle. That's perseverance. Then there's a kind of courage which is just living through the day-to-day grind, the fact that getting there seems like it's forever away, and that's constancy. And the third kind of courage is enduring physical suffering, and that's patience. And that's my topic for my October newsletter. I've already covered in earlier newsletters the other two kinds of courage. So I blocked out on my bib card, because I like to collect my writing onto bib cards, all of the sections that are in my newsletter. I have a number of departments that I cover in my newsletter. Interestingly, including Zettelkasten, I generally devote about 10 pages to the Zettelkasten. But right now, I'm going to be working in the area of analysis of patients, which is where this is going to go, probably, ultimately. But right now, I'm just tracking the fact that I've gained some information. So on the back side, I logged which journal and which page, and a little bit about what the topic is about. So I've noted that information on the bib card, where to find it. And I'm also going to cross-note onto the journal article where I logged this. So now you can see how I work. Here I have the journal article is cited and what it's about, and my journal article itself points to this bib card so that I know where this piece of writing is tracked. And that wasn't all the fun. I had a little extra time this morning, and I decided that I wanted to go ahead and file this card. Oftentimes, I will wait until the evening to give the card its card number, but I wanted to bring this idea into my Zettelkasten, and I did have the opportunity, so I went for it. And what I discovered was the most likely parent card was one of these dead title cards that I've been talking about. Oh, okay. So I did make myself a promise that when I ran into one of these, I would, limiting myself to one a day, but I would expand these as I actually ran headlong into them. And I also made a personal note that I'm going to expand them before I choose the parent, because for exactly the reason that I had here. Once I'd expanded the parent, that became the chosen card. So what did I use to replace this 1F3A, make it a real main card? One of the books that I've selected for my work on patience is The Order of Things by James Shaw. And in that area is the concept of offering up suffering, because it's talking about Socrates and choosing death over evil, and Christ choosing death over evil. And so the card that replaced it is this one, which is the awareness that the idea of offering up our suffering predates Christianity. In fact, the primary Socratic principle is that it's better to suffer evil than to do it. So Christ endured the suffering of the cross and offered it up to the Father, as James Shaw puts it, to restore the alienation of man from God. And my reflection on that is that Christ bore all for us and calls us to come after him, offering up our suffering with his. Now, once that card had been expanded, it was clearly the proper parent for our new card. Because it's rather interesting when you reflect on it. Current science is telling us that if we can abstract the discomfort, the pain of an ailment, of a chronic illness, of some kind of chronic problem that's causing this discomfort and pain, if we can abstract that from this concept of personal suffering, then the actual suffering itself is reduced so much so that it doesn't even take as many opiate drugs to relieve it. And here we have in ancient wisdom, going all the way back to Socrates, and certainly reflected in Christ, is the concept of offering that suffering up. Well, what is it that you're offering up? You're offering up the physical discomfort itself. And that enables you to abstract it from the emotional suffering. So this practice provides a pathway, a mechanism, a training ground, if you will, for achieving the personal state that modern research has shown is advantageous to have. So these two are just definitely tied. So how did he get this number 5? Well, this was already a busy conversation, but a very old one. The oldest card in this one is a personal reflection that goes back almost exactly 2 years. And all of these other cards predate it. So these are some of the oldest cards in my Zettelkasten. Not one of them has a tagline. Not one of them has a personal, well, this is a personal reflection, but the others do not have one. So I also had to, besides making my new main card, I also had to create a directory card and carry forward the full conversation. So now my new card can take its place in a very interesting conversation that is going on about suffering and possibly its redemptive power. However, I'm not going to file this card away in my Zettelkasten just yet because I'm going to keep it in the banks of cards that I am actually pulling from my Zettelkasten for creating this month's newsletter. So I'll just leave an out card in its place and keep this one on hand for writing the October newsletter on patience. I hope you enjoyed watching this card get filed and get created. I am really excited about it, in part because it shows what a Zettelkasten is capable of doing in terms of bringing ideas together. The interesting thing about it is that that dead title card would never have matched with anything. I would have found another card, probably something about the stuff I already know about patients. It would have probably gone there. And yet, because I ran headlong into this card, and I made myself a promise that if I did that, I would limit one a day, turn it into a real main card. And I did so as honestly as I possibly could, only to discover that, wow, that is the perfect parent card for my card. And not only was it the perfect parent card, but it blew me away with the insight that it gave me. Because if you think about it, what Lisa Feldman Barrett is talking about with the difference between discomfort and suffering is quite simply that discomfort is an objective thing. You can identify it. It hurts right there. Suffering is something that just sinks into your being and is how you are. Whereas a discomfort is objectified. And there turns out to be an actual clinical value in objectifying pain and discomfort. And then how interesting that concepts taught all the way from the time of Socrates through Christ, through all of the spiritual writers through the centuries who've talked about the concept of offering up your suffering has that exact same effect. Offering up what? You're offering up an object. You're not offering up your suffering self. Well, maybe you are, but when you're invited to offer up your suffering, it's already been objectified. So it's a practical mechanism by which you can achieve a valuable mind state that modern medical science has shown to be of value. I thought that was pretty amazing. But it also gave me an insight that was very important for me from the concept of patience as in my field of the character trait, because that tells me now that it informed the concept of patience. I knew that patience was the third kind of courage, and I just thought of it as gritting your teeth and enduring suffering. But now I realize that a victory state of patience is actually achieving this objectification of the suffering so that it does not invade your being. And the lost state of patience is just taking it on and letting it lug down, or even worse, rebelling against it when it's absolutely useless, taking it out on someone else, whatever it is, that trying to throw it off when you really can't. So to me, this was just a very productive morning, made so much so. I mean, it was enough of an insight when I just read it and made the card for it. But by the time it landed in my Zettelkasten and mixed with information that was already there, it brought a new awareness to it and informed the work I'm doing right now. That's a Zettelkasten. That is the power of a Zettelkasten. That's why I want you to have a Zettelkasten sitting beside you on your work table, because it can do that for you. And I don't know anything else that is so practical at extending your own human mind and literally, I think, exploding your IQ. I don't think there's any other, I think I would be mincing words to say anything less than that. So that's my dream for you, and I hope this example of me down my area of interest will inspire you to read syntopically, following Adler's methods, keep what you learn in a Zettelkasten, and experience these moments of connection for yourself so that you, in turn, can make a valuable contribution to the outside world of what interests you the most. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.